What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
Before you start driving, sometimes you don't have to be driving to hear something strange. There are many sounds that appear immediately after starting the engine. Let's deal with them first and then listen to the car on the move. Most often you can hear a loud whistling sound immediately after starting the engine. The most obvious cause of this whistling is drive belt of the attachment. As a rule, it is a timing belt, not a timing belt, so it starts to slip over time. The reasons may be different: wear of the belt itself, its insufficient tension, too much force due to wear of the bearings of additional units. It is easy to make sure that it is the belt that whistles. Just spray it with water, or better with a special spray. If the whistle is gone or at least significantly changed, it is time to change the belt or at least check its tension. The belt whistle is usually very loud, making it almost impossible to mistake it for anything else. However, sometimes a similar whistling sound can be heard from under the hood, which also comes from somewhere on the belt side. It's usually quieter, and the culprit is not the belt, but some sort of the bearings in the auxiliary units. In this case, it is better not to delay and go to the service for diagnosis and repair. It will be difficult to accurately identify the culprit, not having experience in this case, and even more so to repair the generator or the pump of GUR on your own. More often it is even impossible. Just like belt whistle, bearing squeak may depend on the weather. In frost the sound may be louder. As it warms up, it may disappear altogether or noticeably subside. A much lower sound, rumbling or even growling, most often appears due to a malfunction of the exhaust system. The first to come under suspicion should be vibration isolation coupling, corrugation, and resonator. The first to burn out or rot are usually the first to do so. It is quite difficult to recognize which one of them started to growl. Sitting in the car, you will not be able to distinguish the difference. Here you will have to go to a hoist or to an inspection pit. There is no other way out. And it will be necessary to change these parts, or at least to weld the resonator. In the service, some half measures in the form of an aluminum can screwed to the hole will help for a short time. The most potentially dangerous unpleasant sounds are made by the engine itself. If it is a distinctive and rather sonorous tinkling sound, which comes from somewhere above, you can not worry. This is often the voice of injectors. They are especially well heard on Korean engines at idle speeds. On the background of smooth and quiet sound of the engine, uniform clicks of injectors can frighten, but there is nothing terrible in this clutter. It is absolutely normal sound worse if something is clearly knocking under the cylinder head cover. Most likely, this indicates some problem with the valves. If the valve train is designed with hydrocompensators, if one of the hydraulics is jammed, the camshaft may knock. It is impossible to drive like this for a long time, because in case of cam wear it will be necessary to change the camshaft, and it is already an expensive pleasure. Well, if there are no hydrocompensators, perhaps it is time to adjust the valves, more precisely, the thermal clearances of the valves. Often owners of cars with gasoline engines complain that these engines, diesel. This word is often used to describe a knocking noise in the piston group, which is produced by the piston skirt when it is shifted at the top dead center. Some motors with such dieseling can drive tens of thousands of kilometers, for example, German engines of EA111 and EA211 series, and can start to eat oil by liters and eventually even jam, for example, Korean G4KD and G4KE. If you hear such a sound, it is better to check the motor with an endoscope. If there is no scoring, you can drive on. If there are, you can either repair the motor, or sell the car, or drive until everything falls apart. Here the choice is up to the owner. By the way, a diesel engine can often knock because of a leaking fuel injector. There is a characteristic hard knock. If the knock disappears as the engine warms up, there is a possibility that there is no need to change the liners and sharpen the crankshaft, and you can limit yourself to repair or replacement of the injector. Another unpleasant sound is a muffled knock from somewhere below, closer to the crankcase. This is the sound of the crankshaft, or more precisely, its liners, crank or main liners. It is difficult to check their condition somehow. For this you will have to disassemble the engine. But you can, for example, measure oil pressure. If it is lower than normal at low speeds on a warmed engine, there will be no good news. Probably, it is time to think about engine overhaul. And if the knock is intensified under the reset of the gas, you can almost certainly say that in the fight with kilometers and years dyed crankshaft liners. Sometimes the chain can knock if it is used in the timing drive and has already stretched. It happens that the sound is similar to a crackle, and sometimes the very real knock if the chain is stretched so that it knocks on the cover. It is often quite difficult to check its condition independently, so it is better to go to the diagnostics. Much more characteristic cracking faulty phasor regulator. Such crackling is especially good in the first seconds after starting the engine. However, phase failure is usually accompanied by a phase synchronization error, so it's not that difficult to diagnose this failure. If you have a scanner and basic diagnostic skills. The good news is that almost always the car can drive with a jammed phase shifter. It will do it badly, but still will. And now the rubric, obvious unbelievable. If when turning the steering wheel there is a rumble, it's time to think about repairing the steering pump. Just do not confuse this sound with the characteristic hissing sound that occurs when the steering wheel is turned all the way to the stop. In this case, the bypass valve in the pump is hissing, and this is a normal sound. But you should not enjoy it for too long, because at this moment the pump is experiencing increased stress. It is better to turn the steering wheel away from the stop by at least 10 degrees, so GUR will live longer. If when turning the steering wheel there is not a rumble, but a whistling sound, it is the pump drive belt complaining about life. It will need to be replaced. Everything is simple. Also, when turning the steering wheel can make different sounds, squeaks or clicks. Support bearings. If when you try to shake the car a little, you can see how the shock absorber rod walks in the support bearing of the rack under the hood, it will have to be replaced. For a more accurate check, it is better to put your hand on it. The backlash of the rod is a sure sign of the bearing's death. And, finally, we squeeze the clutch pedal on a car with a manual transmission. How has the sound of work changed? Is there some kind of rumble? That's the death knell, the release bearing, and if the rumble when the pedal is depressed becomes quieter, it's time to check the gearbox. Of course, these are far from all incomprehensible sounds that can be heard while standing still. For example, even a decrease in the noise level when the clutch pedal is depressed can sometimes speak not of a gearbox malfunction, but of some malfunction in the clutch itself. For example, in the damper designed to dampen torsional vibration, i.e. in the clutch slave disc or the dual mass flywheel. And the rumble can be produced by the diaphragm of the valve of the crankcase gas venting system. It may be simply torn, or it may be the wear of the piston group. Serious diagnostics is required. Even the diode bridge of the alternator, so it will be too difficult for a beginner to understand the nature of some strange sounds. But the main ones we remembered, so let's move on to the sounds that appear during the trip. Noises after starting to drive. So, the car has just moved, and the driver already hears a strange rustling sound from somewhere in the wheels. If the car was parked for a couple of days the day before, it's okay, it's the brake pads rustling on the discs. After a couple of brakes, the sound will go away. However, if it appears every morning during daily use of the car, you should think about revision of brake mechanisms. There is a high probability that one of calipers is wedged. If nothing is done, not only the pads, but also the disc will have to be replaced early. And maybe also the hub bearing, which will suffer from chronic overheating. The most popular, but at the same time difficult to diagnose sound is a squeak. We will not describe all the ways to find the squeak. We have separate publications that will help you find the cause of the squeak. And in the rear wishbone suspension and the simpler one with semi-dependent beam, front McPherson, often it is impossible to find the source of this sound without a hoist and a tire iron, so let's remember only the most obvious causes of squeaking. The first is wear and tear stabilizer bars. The easiest way to check the struts is to drive over a lying policeman at a slight angle. The struts squeak more when there is a diagonal load on the stabilizer, so if there is no squeak when driving over an artificial bump strictly perpendicularly, but there is when driving diagonally, it is almost certain that it is time to change the struts. From the rear on cars with semi-dependent suspension usually squeak beam silent blocks, and they may still look normal. Obvious delaminations are noticeable only if the silent block died a long time ago. The squeaking can also be ball joints. Check them is not difficult, but again, on the elevator by and large, it is easier to look for the cause of the squeak in the service. If you act at random, you can replace and stabilize a bar and ball bearings and silent blocks and levers in the assembly and only then to realize that squeaks a coil of rusty spring. If there is no experience at all, it is better not to risk your money and give into the hands of professionals. The same situation with knocking, its causes can be worn-out stabilizer struts, although they squeak more often, and shock absorbers. And broken springs and even the suspension system of the exhaust system or leaking hydraulic supports engine or gearbox. In this case, you will either have to check everything sequentially or go to a service. Without experience, the search may take indefinite time. Crunching or clicking is a little easier to understand. Crunching at speed with the steering wheel turned is a classic sign of wear and tear of the hinge. Sometimes it can also manifest itself with clicks, but it can also be a tripod, the inner ball joint. It can be checked by slowly moving back and forth. If at the moment of starting to move you hear a clicking sound somewhere below, it may well be the tripod. Sometimes this sound can be referred to normal. For example, on some cars on the B0 platform with MKP it can be heard quite well. Sometimes it can indicate the wear of the tripod, especially if together with this sound appears vibration when gaining speed. Sometimes on the move can click not tightened after tire fitting wheel. If the bolts or nuts of the drive wheel are not tightened, the clicks disappear under load, that is, when speeding up, and appear if you go rolling. It is better to stop and check the tightness of the fasteners. Sometimes it's hard to tell what's making a rumbling noise if it is not the exhaust system, which in case of malfunction growls on the standing car. Then first you need to check the most obvious, hub bearings. If the rumble becomes louder in a left turn, the cause is in the right bearing, and vice versa. Drive or cardan suspension bearings may also hum, but it is more difficult to check them. Welcome to the hoist. In rare cases, a bent crankcase protector or other elements located underneath may hum. But again, you can check its fastening or see the consequences of some impact only on a hoist. Although, of course, and exclude the protection from the list of suspects is not worth it. Transmissions, both manual and automatic, can hum rather unpleasantly. In mechanics, the cause may be in the primary shaft bearing or in badly worn gears. And sometimes simply because of low oil level. It is difficult to check the box yourself, but you can conduct a test, see if there is no change in the tone of the rumble when gaining speed in different gears. If there is a change and there is no rumble when rolling, something is definitely wrong with the box. In a classic automatic, most often the torque converter rumbles, and if there are some uneven jolts when gaining speed or braking the engine, the matter is most likely in it. Well, in the variator the cause of trolleybus hum, except for bearings, may be the wear of the belt, chain or cones. This is a very sad reason, because it is expensive to change them now. If there is a suspicion that it is the variator that is humming, you should not delay with repair. You can try to save at least the cones. And, of course, we remind you of the rhythmic grinding noise that may come from the wheel while driving. It is necessary to check the brake pads. Most likely, their pads have worn down to metal, and now this metal rubs against the brake disc. If the wear on one side is much more intense than on the other, it is necessary to check the brakes. Uneven wear of the pads is a clear sign of a sour caliper. It's not over yet. Just as in the case with strange sounds that are heard on the spot, we do not list absolutely all the reasons for the appearance of noises on the move. In life, they can be much more diverse. Can hum and knock cross-drive shaft on cars with all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive, can hum gearbox or even whistling wind in the wiper blades. But still, the most popular reasons for the appearance of strange sounds we have listed. Let's add only one detail: do not follow the saying that a good knock itself will come out. It can come out and the connecting rod through the block wall and running forward of the car wheel and pierce the floor of the cabin, fallen off cardan. It is not necessary to bring the car to this point. It is dangerous. Therefore, it is simply unacceptable. In conclusion, being attuned to the sounds your car makes can be crucial in identifying potential malfunctions early on. Whether it's a humming noise indicating an issue with the engine, a knocking sound suggesting problems with the suspension, whistling that may point to a leak, or crunching that could signal brake wear, each sound tells a story about your vehicle's health. By paying attention to these auditory clues, you can take proactive steps to address issues before they escalate, ensuring a safer and more reliable driving experience. Remember, your ears can be just as important as your eyes when it comes to car maintenance. Stay alert, stay informed, and keep your vehicle in top shape.